There are conversations that change the direction of a life. Not the dramatic conversations, not the ones delivered with raised voices in moments of crisis. The quiet ones, the ones that happen in small offices with afternoon light coming through the window and a cup of tea growing cold between two people who are both being more honest than they planned to be. I had that conversation in October, in the office of Professor Khalid Mansur. I was 24 years old. I was a graduate student in religious studies at Georgetown University, and I had been carrying something, a specific weight, the kind that is not dramatic in its presence but is constant in its cost for as long as I could remember. The weight had a name. I had known the name since I was 17. I had been managing the name since I was 17. Managing it in the way that people manage things that are true and inconvenient simultaneously by keeping them in a specific interior room and not going in very often. Professor Khalid Mansur was 42 years old. He was Egyptian American, a scholar of Islamic theology and ethics, the holder of an endowed chair, the author of 5 books that occupied a specific position in the conversation between traditional Islamic scholarship and contemporary questions of human dignity and justice. He was also the most respected person in my department. And he had invited me to his office. Not for discipline, not for academic concern. He had sent an email that said simply, "I would like to talk with you about your research. My office hours are Tuesday at 3, if you are available." I was available. I should tell you who I was before I tell you what the conversation was. My name is Tariq. I was 24 years old. Iranian American, my family from Tehran, my parents having come to the United States when I was 3. I had grown up in Dearborn, Michigan, a city with one of the largest Arab and Muslim American populations in the country, a community of extraordinary depth and complexity and warmth, a community I loved and that had shaped me in the ways that communities shape the people who grow up in them. I was also gay. Since 17, managing since 17. In a community where the management was not simple. This is the story of the conversation. And everything it led to. The Georgetown Religious Studies Department was a specific kind of academic environment. The kind that took seriously the idea that understanding religion was not a distant, clinical exercise but a practice of genuine engagement. The faculty were not uniformly believers, but they were uniformly people who understood that religion was one of the most significant forces in human history and that understanding it required more than the observer's position. I had chosen Georgetown for this reason. I was writing my dissertation on the intersection of Islamic ethics and contemporary questions of human dignity, a broad framing that contained, in its interior, a more specific question that I had not yet found the language to put on a page. The question of what the tradition said and what it meant and what it cost and what the cost was worth and who bore it. The personal version of that question had no space in my academic work. Or so I had believed. Professor Mansur had apparently noticed the gap. He was not what people who had not met him expected. The endowed chair, the 5 books, the international reputation in Islamic studies, these suggested to someone who had not encountered him a certain gravity of presence, the kind that filled a room with authority and required careful navigation. He was not that. He was present, that was the word. In the way that very few people are present completely in the room, completely attending to what was actually happening rather than to what he expected to be happening. He wore glasses that he took off when he was thinking carefully and put back on when he had arrived at something. He had the hands of someone who thought through his hands. They moved when he spoke, not dramatically, but with the specific expressiveness of someone whose interior activity was partially visible. He had been at Georgetown for 12 years. He had a wife, Dr. Amina Hassan, who was a bioethicist at Georgetown Medical. He had a daughter, Layla, who was 7 and who he mentioned occasionally in seminars in the specific casual warmth of a parent for whom their child was simply present in everything. I had been in his seminars for a year. I had heard him think about things I had not considered. I had disagreed with him twice carefully with the specific nervousness of disagreeing with an endowed chair in their own seminar, and both times he had received the disagreement with the specific quality of genuine interest. Not capitulation, not dismissal, the response of someone who found being disagreed with intellectually stimulating. I had been managing my interior question for a year of his seminars. And he had apparently noticed the management. Tuesday at 3. His office was on the 3rd floor of the building with a window facing east that, in October, caught the afternoon light at an angle that made the books on the shelves glow with the specific warm quality of old paper and careful attention. The books were everywhere, not decorative. The
1 second.
accumulation of a scholar's working life, marked,
Taking video.
annotated, stacked on horizontal surfaces in the specific organized disorder of someone who used their books as ongoing conversations rather than finished references. On his desk, a tea service, 2 cups. He had made tea before I arrived, which meant he had thought about the conversation in advance and had prepared for the specific warmth of hospitality that the tradition he studied also required of its practitioners. "Sit," he said, "please." I sat. He poured tea. He sat across from me. He looked at me with the full attention I had seen him direct at seminars and at the texts he analyzed. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Thank you for the invitation," I said. A pause, the specific quality of a pause that is deliberate rather than empty. "Your dissertation chapter," he said, "the one you submitted last week on the ethics of witness in the tradition." "Yes," I said. "It is excellent work," he said. "The framing is precise, the engagement with the primary sources is rigorous." He held his teacup, and there is a gap in the center of it. I held my cup. "What gap?" I said. "The question the chapter is circling," he said, without landing on. I held my cup. "What question?" I said. He held my gaze. "The personal one," he said, "the question you are asking from the inside rather than the outside." The office, the afternoon light, the 2 cups of tea. "Professor Manser," I said. "Khalid," he said, "in office hours, please." "Khalid," I said. "You do not have to tell me anything," he said. "That is the first thing I want you to know. This is not a requirement or a condition. You are here because I thought the conversation might be useful. If I am wrong, tell me and we will talk about the chapter purely academically." I held my cup. "You're not wrong," I said. He held his cup. "Tell me," he said, "whatever you want to tell me." I held the tea. I had been managing for 7 years. I had told 3 people, my college roommate, a therapist in my junior year, and Priya, my closest friend who was not from the community. I had not told anyone in the community. I had not told anyone who had the specific intersection of faith and tradition and scholarship that this man had. "I'm gay," I said. The afternoon light on the books. He received it. Not with surprise. I understood later that he had suspected, which was why he had sent the email. But he received it with the full quality of someone who received information with all of their attention. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How long have you known?" "Since I was 17, I said. "And how long have you been carrying it alone?" he said. "In this context," I said, "always." He held his cup. "Thank you," he said, "for trusting me with this." I held mine. "You're not," I started. "Not what?" he said. "I don't know what I expected," I said, "but this is not it." He looked at me. "What did you expect?" he said. "Something harder," I said. "I am a scholar of ethics," he said, "and I am a person of faith. Neither of those things requires me to be unkind to a young man who is telling me something that has cost him considerably to carry." He held his cup. "What would you like from this conversation?" I held mine. "I don't know," I said. "I've been circling the question in my dissertation, the gap you identified. I think I was hopping." I stopped. "What?" he said. "That someone who knew the tradition as well as you do," I said, "might have something to say about the question that wasn't the answer I've been afraid of." He held his cup. "The tradition is not a monolith," he said. "I think you know this, you have been studying it for a year." "I know it intellectually," I said. "It's different from knowing it in the place the question actually lives." "Yes," he said, "it is." We held our cups. "Tariq," he said. "Yes." "I want to tell you something," he said. "And I want to be clear that I am speaking as a scholar and as a person and not as a representative of the tradition's range of positions on this question, because that range is complex and I do not want to simplify it for comfort." "Tell me," I said. "There is a student," he said, "in my department, who has been writing some of the most nuanced scholarship I have seen in 12 years of teaching, who engages the tradition with the specific combination of love and intellectual rigor that the best scholarship requires." He held his cup. That student is also a person, with a life and an interior and a question that has been making his scholarship circle rather than land. He looked at me. The question deserves the same rigor the scholarship receives, and the person asking it deserves to know that the asking does not diminish either the scholarship or the person. I held my cup. Something in my chest. Thank you, I said. There is also, he said, something else I want to tell you, something personal. I looked at him. My brother, he said, my younger brother Hassan, he is 38, he is also gay, he has been out for 10 years, he lives in Toronto with his partner of 6 years, a man named David. He held his cup. I am telling you this because I want you to know that I am not speaking abstractly, that this question is not academic for me either. The afternoon light. The books. How did you? I started. How did I receive it? He said. Yes, I said. Imperfectly at first, he said, with the specific difficulty of a person who loves his brother and also holds the tradition seriously and had to navigate between those two things. He paused, and then with the recognition that the love was larger than the difficulty, and that the tradition, properly understood, was not in opposition to the love. I held my tea. Your brother, I said, he's okay. He is happy, he said. Genuinely, he is a doctor. He runs a community health clinic in Toronto that serves people who would otherwise have no care. He is, in every sense of the word, exactly who he was meant to be. I held my cup. Thank you, I said, for telling me that. Thank you, he said, for coming on Tuesday. I left his office at 5:15. I had been there for 2 hours and 15 minutes and the tea had gone cold, and I had said more to Professor Khalid Mansur in that office than I had said to anyone in the community in 7 years. I walked across the Georgetown campus in the October evening, and the leaves were doing what October leaves do, turning slowly toward what they become before they fall, and I thought about what he had said. About the tradition not being a monolith, about his brother Hassan, about the question deserving the same rigor the scholarship receives, and I thought about the gap in the chapter that he had identified, the personal question at the center of the academic work, and I thought the gap is closing, not completely, not yet, but something had happened in that office that had moved the question from the interior room, where I had been keeping it for 7 years, towards somewhere closer to the surface. Somewhere closer to the air, and I thought about the man who had moved it, about the quiet office and the 2 cups of tea and the specific quality of being received completely by someone who held the same tradition and had not found the receiving to be a contradiction. And I thought, this is not over, this conversation is not the end of something, it is the beginning of something, and I was not yet sure what. November. I went back to his office. Not for academic reasons, or not only for academic reasons. The academic reasons were the container, the dissertation chapter, the framing questions, the rigorous engagement with the primary sources that the chapter required. These were real. The chapter needed the conversation. But the chapter was not the only reason. He was in when I arrived. He was always in during office hours, which I had come to understand was not universal among endowed chairs. Some used office hours as the nominal obligation they technically were. He used them as what they were supposed to be. He poured tea. I sat. We talked about the chapter for 40 minutes. He was precise and challenging, and the conversation produced 3 ideas that I had not had before he said the things that produced them. This was the quality of talking with him academically, not that he gave you answers, but that his questions opened spaces you had not known were there. At some point the chapter receded. You seem lighter, he said. Then October, I said. Then you have been since I have known you, he said. In a year of seminars you have had the quality of someone carrying weight, you seem lighter. The conversation helped, I said. Good, he said, that was the hope. I held my cup. Can I ask you something, I said, about your brother? Yes, he said. When he told you, I said, how long did it take to get from imperfectly at first to the recognition? He held his cup. 3 years, he said. I'm not proud of the 3 years, but they were honest. I needed to do the work of examining what I actually believed versus what I had inherited without examination, of reading more carefully, of sitting with the question in the tradition rather than the surface of the tradition. He paused, and of watching my brother, who is the most ethical person I know, who demonstrates daily that his life is not in opposition to anything I understand the tradition to actually require. I held this. 3 years, I said. I was also younger then, he said, and had done less of the work. He looked at me. You have been doing the work for years, I can see it in the scholarship. The work of the question, I said. Yes, he said, the specific intellectual and spiritual work of someone who is genuinely engaging with what they believe rather than managing what they believe. I looked at my cup. Managing is exhausting, I said. I know, he said. You manage something, I said. He held his cup. Yes, he said, different from yours, but the management of something that was in tension with expectation, the specific cost of carrying a version of yourself that is not the full version. He paused. I will not compare costs, but I know the quality of the carrying. I looked at him. What did you manage? I said. He was quiet for a moment. My marriage, he said, in the early years it was arranged not in the traditional sense but facilitated by families, and for the first years I managed within it rather than built within it. The difference between managing a relationship and being genuinely in one. He paused. Amina and I are genuinely in one now, but it required the
One
specific
second.
work of stopping the management. I
Taking
held
video.
this. What changed? I said. She did, he said. She stopped accepting the managed version. She said, I want the actual person. Give me the actual person or this is not what I thought it was. He looked at his cup. It was the most frightening and most necessary thing anyone had ever said to me. I held my cup. Stop managing, I said. Give me the actual person. Yes, he said. Is that advice? I said. He looked at me. It is observation, he said, applied wherever it is applicable. I held my cup. Khalid, I said. Yes. There is a person, I said. He held his cup. He did not say anything, he waited. In the department, I said, a visiting scholar. He arrived in September. The visiting scholar. His name was Youssef Ben Ali. He was 31, Moroccan-American, his family from Marrakesh, educated at the Sorbonne and then at Princeton. He was at Georgetown for a year as a visiting fellow in the department, working on a project about the history of Sufi ethical thought in North Africa. I had met him at the department welcome reception in September. He had been standing by the window with a glass of water which he held with both hands, and he had been looking at the campus beyond the glass with the specific quality of someone who was genuinely looking rather than simply orienting. I had introduced myself. He had looked at me with dark eyes that were direct in the specific way of someone for whom directness was simply the honest option. Tariq, he had said, I've read your work on the ethics of witness. Already, I said, the paper had been published 3 months earlier in a department working paper series. I read everything from the departments I'm visiting before I arrive, he said. Yours was the most interesting paper. Why? I said. Because it is asking the question beneath the question, he said. Most scholarship in this area stays at the surface, yours is going somewhere. I had thought about this for 3 days. I had been thinking about Youssef Ben Ali in some form since September. Tell me about this person, Khalid said. I told him, the reception, the paper comment, the 3 weeks since in which I had been in the same department as Youssef Ben Ali and had been managing the awareness of him with the same discipline I had applied to everything for 7 years. He's Moroccan-American, I said. I don't know his orientation, I don't know. I stopped. I know nothing except that he read my paper before he arrived and found it the most interesting one, and that he is here for a year, and that the awareness of him is. I stopped. Significant, Khalid said. Yes, I said. What do you want? He said. I don't know, I said. What do you want? He said again, specifically. I held my cup. I want to know him, I said, not in the managed way, in the actual way. Then know him, he said. It's not that simple, I said. What makes it complicated? He said. I don't know if he is, I stopped. I don't know if this is one-sided. You don't know anything until you know him, he said, and you don't know him yet. I held my cup. And if it is one-sided, I said. Then you know a Moroccan-American scholar of Sufi ethics who read your paper before he arrived and found it the most interesting one, he said. That is not nothing. I looked at him. You make it sound straightforward, I said. It is not straightforward, he said. It is, however, the direction, straightforward or not. I found a direction. Not a plan, a direction. The department had a library, a seminar library, the kind with long tables and specific collections that were relevant to the department's research. It was used in the afternoons by faculty and graduate students working on their projects. Yosef worked there on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. I had noticed this because I worked there on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. The noticing had been mutual. We had exchanged the specific nod of two people who occupy the same space regularly and have moved from strangers to acknowledged presences without the intermediate step of conversation. On a Thursday in November, I sat at the table 3 seats from where he was working. He looked up when I sat down. I looked back. "The witness chapter," he said, not hello, not good afternoon, the chapter directly. "Yes," I said. "I've been thinking about the gap," he said. I held very still. "What gap?" I said. "The question the chapter is circling," he said, without landing on. The same words Khalid had used. "2 people have said that to me recently," I said. "Then 2 people are reading carefully," he said. He looked at me for a moment. "Are you going to land on it?" he said. "I'm working toward it," I said. "What's stopping you?" he said. I looked at him. "The landing requires a courage the circling doesn't," I said. He held my gaze. "Yes," he said, "that's usually the problem with the questions that matter most."
1 second.
He went back to his work. I went back to
Taking
mine.
video.
But something had happened in the exchange that had not been in the room before it. A recognition. The specific quality of 2 people who have registered something in each other that requires neither of them to name it yet. I texted Khalid that evening. I know texting my dissertation advisor felt unconventional. He had offered his number after the October meeting with the specific generosity of someone who understood that some conversations could not wait for office hours. The text said I had a conversation in the library today with the person I mentioned. He responded, "How was it?" I said, "He identified the same gap in the chapter that you did." He said he reads carefully. "What else?" I said, "He asked what was stopping me from landing on it." He said, "What did you say?" I said that the landing requires a courage the circling doesn't. He said, "True, what did he say?" I said, "He said that's usually the problem with the questions that matter most." Khalid was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "He sounds like someone who has asked some of the same questions." I held my phone. I said, "Yes, I think he has." December. He asked me. Not dramatically, the way he did everything directly with the specific quality of someone for whom asking was the honest option. We were leaving the library on a Tuesday afternoon and he said, "There's a coffee shop on Wisconsin Avenue. I've been meaning to go. Do you want to come?" "Yes," I said. We walked. The December afternoon was cold in the Washington, D.C. way, not the brutal Chicago cold I knew from family visits, but the specific damp cold of a city on the Potomac that commits to winter without the plains wind. He walked with his hands in his jacket pockets, and he talked about his Sufi ethics project with the animation that his work produced in him. At the coffee shop, we sat across from each other. He ordered coffee with the specific request of someone who knew exactly what they wanted. I ordered tea, he noted this. "Tea," he said. "Always," I said. "My grandmother drank tea," he said, "in Marrakesh from a pot that was always on the stove. The house always smelled of mint." "My mother's house smelled of saffron," I said. "She put it in everything." He looked at me. "Dearborn," he said. "Yes," I said, "you know Dearborn." "My family had friends there," he said. "We visited when I was 12, the community was complicated and wonderful," I said. "Yes." He smiled. "Yes," he said, "exactly." We talked for 2 hours. About Marrakesh and Dearborn, about the Sorbonne and Georgetown, about Sufi thought and the ethics of witness, about what had brought us both to this specific department in this specific city and what we hoped to do after. At some point he said, "The chapter, the gap." "Yes," I said. "I have a gap in my project," he said, "a similar one." I held my cup. "Tell me," I said. He held his coffee. "The question I am researching," he said, "the history of Sufi ethical thought, it is academic, it is rigorous, it is also," he stopped. "Personal," I said. He looked at me. "You recognized it," he said. "The same way you recognized mine," I said. He held his coffee. "Yosef," I said. "Tariq," he said. We held each other's gaze across the coffee shop table in December. "I have been carrying something," he said, "for a long time in the tradition I study, A question that the academic work circles but does not land on. How long, I said. Since I was 20, he said. Since Paris, since the Sorbonne. I held my cup. I'm gay, I said. The 3 words. Said in a coffee shop in Washington, D.C. in December. To a man I had known for 3 months who had read my paper before he arrived and found it the most interesting one. He held his coffee. He looked at me. So am I, he said. The coffee shop was warm. The December afternoon was gray outside the window. He had said so am I with the specific quality of someone who had said it very few times and who had needed to say it in this specific moment more than he had expected. We sat with it for a long time, not uncomfortably. The way you sit with something that has just been named correctly, with the specific relief of accurate language applied to a real thing. He told me about Paris. About 20 years old, and the Sorbonne and the specific loneliness of being in a city that was free in ways that felt both liberating and foreign. About the years of managing. About the scholarship that had been the container. About the Sufi thought that had given him a language for the interior life that the exterior life did not yet reflect. And I told him about Dearborn in 17 and the 7 years and the interior room and the gap in the chapter that Khalid had identified. And we were there until they began dimming the lights, at 9 o'clock when the coffee shop was closing, and we walked out into the December night and I thought 2 cups of tea, an October office, a November library, a December coffee shop, the direction that Khalid had pointed me in, and the man walking beside me in the Washington, D.C. cold who had read my paper before he arrived and had found it the most interesting one and had known why. The holiday break. He went to Marrakesh for 2 weeks. His grandmother was there, the grandmother with the mint tea and the pot always on the stove. He had not been back in a year and the absence of her specifically had been, he had told me in the coffee shop, the thing that made international academic work hardest. I went to Dearborn. My parents, my mother's saffron kitchen, my younger sister who was in her last year of high school and who was the sharpest person in the family and who noticed within 24 hours that something had changed. You seem different, she said. Different how, I said. Like something you were holding is less heavy, she said. I looked at her. When did you get this perceptive, I said. I've always been this perceptive, she said. You've been too heavy to notice. I thought about this for a long time. I called Khalid on the 3rd day of the break, to check in, to tell him about the December coffee shop. He was quiet when I told him. Then he said how did it feel, saying it to him. Like the landing, I said, the thing the chapter had been circling. Good, he said. And he said the same thing back, I said. I thought he might, he said. You suspected, I said. The way he read your paper, he said, the gap he identified in the first conversation in the library, the specific quality of what you described, yes, I suspected. You could have told me, I said. No, he said, that was yours to discover. I held the phone. Khalid, I said. Yes. Thank you, I said, for the October meeting, for the tea, for sending the email. Thank you, he said, for coming on Tuesday. He came back in January. We resumed the library afternoons, the Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, but differently now, the acknowledged presence had become acknowledged friendship had become something that was finding its name. We talked every day. Not always in person, texts that were long in the way that texts between 2 scholars who could not stop thinking about things were long. Voice calls on the evenings when the texts were insufficient. February. We were walking along the towpath of the C&O Canal on a Saturday morning. The canal in February was not beautiful in the obvious sense, no leaves, no warmth, the water gray and the trees bare. But Washington, D.C. in February had the specific quality of a city that was planning something, that was building toward what it was going to be. He walked beside me. I want to tell you something, he said. Tell me, I said. In Paris, he said, at the Sorbonne there was someone. He held his jacket against the cold. His name was Anton, he was French from Lyon, we were in the same program, he was the first person, he stopped. The first real thing, I said. The phrase that had appeared in so many versions of the stories I had been hearing for months. Yes, he said, the first real thing, and it ended when I came back to the United States for Princeton. The distance, the specific logistics of 2 lives on different continents, he paused. And I decided after Anton that the academic work would be the primary thing, that the question of love was too complicated given everything else. Given the tradition, I said. Given the tradition, he said, given the family, given the community, Given the specific complexity of being a Moroccan-American scholar of Islamic ethics who is also gay, the complications seem to outweigh the possibility. I walked beside him. And now, I said. He looked at the canal. Now I have been in Washington, D.C. for 5 months, he said. And I have met a graduate student who writes about the ethics of witness and who identifies the gap in his own work as requiring a courage the circling doesn't. And I have been, he stopped. What? I said. Reconsidering the calculation, he said. I held the cold air. Yosef, I said. Yeah. What changed the calculation? I said. He looked at me. You did, he said, the specific courage of saying it in the coffee shop in December to someone you did not know well enough to be certain of. He paused. I have been thinking about that courage, about what it cost you to say it and why you said it anyway. It cost less than I expected, I said, by December. Why? He said. Because I had been practicing, I said, since October in Khalid's office with the 2 cups of tea. He was quiet. I need to tell you something, I said. Tell me, he said. I am not circling anymore, I said. Since the coffee shop I have been, I stopped, found the right word, landing on the question, on the thing the question was actually about. He held my gaze. What is the thing the question was actually about? He said. You, I said. The question the chapter was circling was always about you. Not you specifically, I didn't know you when I wrote the chapter, but the version of you that the chapter was hopping to reach. The person who would read the chapter before arriving and find it the most interesting one because they were asking the same question from the inside. He was very still. Tariq, he said. Yeah. I read your chapter, he said, before I arrived. I know, I said.
Taking video.
I found it the most interesting one, he said. I know, I said. Because I recognized the inside, he said. I know, I said. He looked at the canal. Are you saying what I think you're saying? He said. I'm saying, I said, that the chapter has landed, that I am not circling anymore, and that what is at the center of the question is something I would like to find out if you are willing to find out with me. He held my gaze. The canal, the February morning, the city planning what it was going to be. Yes, he said. Yes, I said. Yes, he said, I am willing. March. The chapter was finished. Not the gap version, the completed version. The version that landed on the question, not with a personal disclosure. This was academic scholarship, and the personal and the academic had different appropriate boundaries, but with the intellectual courage that the question required, the rigorous engagement with the tradition's complexity, the acknowledgement that the question of human dignity and the tradition's engagement with it had more dimensions than the surface of the conversation usually admitted. Khalid read it. He sat with it in his office. He told me this later for an afternoon before he responded. When he responded, he sent an email that said, the chapter has arrived, come to office hours, tea is on. I went. He poured 2 cups. He looked at me. You landed, he said. Yes, I said. How does it feel, he said. Like what I imagine flying feels like, I said, terrifying and entirely natural. He smiled. And the other thing, he said, the person you mentioned in November. We are finding out, I said, what it is. Good, he said. It is complicated, I said, the specific complications of everything, the community, the family, the tradition, the professional context, the year-long visiting fellowship that ends in June. Yes, he said, complicated. But not impossible, I said. No, he said, not impossible. I held my cup. Khalid, I said. Yes. When you and Amina stopped managing, I said, when you gave her the actual person, what did that look like? He held his cup. Like this, he said, sitting across from someone with tea between you, saying the true thing instead of the managed version, accepting that the true thing was enough. He paused. And then doing the daily work of continuing to be the actual person rather than reverting to the managed one. The daily work, I said. Yes, he said, love is not the moment of landing, it is the daily discipline of staying landed. I held this. That sounds like the Sufi ethical framework, I said. He smiled. It is, he said, the interior work and the exterior practice, both required, neither sufficient without the other. I held my cup. We're going to have difficult conversations, I said, with people about everything. Yes, he said. Will you be? I stopped. Available, he said. Someone who has been through some version of it, I said, who might know what I don't know yet. Yes, he said, I am available, he paused. I have been available since I sent the email in October. His fellowship ended in June. The question of what came after had been present since February when we had begun finding out what it was. Present in the way that important questions are present, not always at the surface but always underneath everything. He had been offered a position at Georgetown, a junior faculty position in the department. The specific academic convergence of a year of working in the department and producing work that the department wanted to keep. He told me about it on a Tuesday evening. We were at the apartment, his apartment, the faculty visitor apartment that he had inhabited for the year, which was modestly furnished and that he had made his own through the accumulation of books and the specific warm disorder of someone who worked everywhere at once. Georgetown offered me a position, he said. I held my tea. Junior faculty, he said. I held my tea. I'm considering it, he said. What would make you not consider it? I said. He looked at me. Nothing, he said. Nothing, I said. The question of whether to take it is not complicated, he said. The position is good, the department is good, the work is good. He paused. You are here. I held my tea. Yosef, I said. Yes. Take the position, I said. Yes, he said. Yes, I said. He held his tea. There are still difficult conversations ahead, he said, with my family. With the community, with the specific complexity of. I know, I said. You are prepared for that, he said. I have been preparing, I said, since October in Khalid's office. He looked at me. Khalid's office, he said. It is a good place, I said, for difficult things. He held his cup. My grandmother called this week, he said. She asked about Washington, D.C. What did you tell her? I said.
1 second.
I told her the city was cold in winter and
Taking
planning
video.
something in spring, he said, and that I had found something worth staying for. What did she say? I said. She said, is there someone? He said. I held my cup. What did you say? I said. I said yes, he said, and she said, tell me. I looked at him. And I said. And I told her, he said, the shape of it, not all of it, but the shape. How did she receive it? He said. She was quiet for a long time, he said, and then she said, I have been making tea for 60 years, the best conversations happen over tea. He paused, and then she said, when are you bringing him to Marrakesh? I held my cup. Something in my chest. The mint tea in Marrakesh, the grandmother who had been making it for 60 years. Yosef, I said. Yeah. I want to meet your grandmother, I said. He looked at me. She wants to meet you, he said. When? I said. August, he said, if you're willing, I'm going for 3 weeks if you wanted, he stopped. Yes, I said without hesitation. You didn't let me finish the question, he said. I didn't need to, I said. The answer was yes before the question was complete. He held his cup. The ethics of witness, he said, the chapter. Yes, I said. The question it was circling, he said, about what it means to be a full witness to yourself, to be present to your own existence without the management. Yes, I said. You have landed, he said. We have landed, I said. He looked at me across the modest apartment with the accumulated books and the specific disorder of someone who worked everywhere at once. He reached across the table. He put his hand on mine. The specific warmth of it. The weight. The daily chosen thing of someone who had read a paper before arriving and had found it the most interesting one because he was asking the same question from the inside. Tariq, he said. Yeah. I love you, he said, in June, in the faculty visitor apartment, over tea that was going cold. I love you too, I said, since the December coffee shop. Since the library, he said. Since the reception in September, I said. The window, he said. You were looking at the campus, I said, with genuine attention. I was, he said. That's when I noticed, I said. He held my hand. Khalid's email, he said, the one that brought you to the office in October. Yes, I said. He did something significant, he said. He opened a door, I said, 2 cups of tea, he opened a door. He looked at me. 2 cups of tea, he said. The right number, I said. Yes, he said, the right number. Marrakesh. The grandmother's house in the Medina, the old city, the specific smell of a place that is ancient and daily simultaneously, the spice markets, the bougainvillea on the walls, the tea that was always on the stove. Her name was Fatima. She was 81 years old and she had the specific quality of someone who had seen a great deal and had kept her opinions sharp rather than letting them soften with age. She looked at me when I arrived. The specific assessment of a woman who had been waiting for the person her grandson had mentioned. She did not speak for a moment. Then she said in the Arabic that Yusuf translated for me, "He has kind eyes." Yusuf translated. I held the kind eyes she had described. Tell her, I said, that her grandson told me about the mint tea. Yusuf translated. She looked at me. She said something. Yusuf said, she says, then you will have some. She made tea. We sat in the courtyard of her house in the Medina with the bougainvillea on the walls and the specific quality of an August afternoon in Marrakesh that was warm and unhurried and full of the sound of a city that was ancient and daily simultaneously. She spoke and Yusuf translated and I listened and responded, and the conversation moved across languages the way conversations move between people who do not share a language but share something more fundamental. At some point she said something that made Yusuf quiet for a moment before translating. What did she say? I said. He held his cup. She said, the best conversations happen over tea, he said, and that the people worth having them with are the people who come back for the second cup. I held my cup. Tell her, I said, that I have been having tea with important people for the past year, that it seems to be how I find the things that matter. Yusuf translated. She looked at me. She smiled. She said something brief. She says, Yusuf said, welcome.